Have you ever noticed how some people seem to exist in the world, but not within it? Rei Ayanami is exactly that, a girl who lives but does not feel alive. She obeys, fights, sacrifices herself, but has she ever wondered who she really is? It is disturbing to think that someone can spend their entire life following orders and expectations, without ever looking in the mirror of their own soul. Imagine being born without choice, without a past, without your own identity, being constantly molded to be useful, but never being someone. Now think. How many times do you do the same thing, even without realizing it? How many times do you suppress feelings, stifle curiosity, or distance yourself from those you love just to protect yourself? Rei shows us the rawest side of human loneliness, and perhaps that is why her story hurts us so much. Today, we are going to dive into the mind of Rei Ayanami. Explore her traumas, her pains, and the small gestures that reveal humanity where no one else sees. Get ready to see Rei Ayanami like never before, not just an EVA pilot, but a mirror to the deepest dilemmas of human existence. Because understanding her is, in a way, beginning to understand ourselves. If you are a fan of cinema, psychology, and want to understand the mind behind your favorite character, subscribe to the channel now so you do not miss any video. But first, comment below which character you want me to analyze here on the channel. Now, let's go to the video. Rei Ayanami is the kind of character who seems like a human-shaped enigma. Looking at her is like trying to understand silence, calm on the outside, but full of noise inside. She lives surrounded by an air of mystery, an almost ethereal presence, as if she does not fully belong to that world. But it is precisely this emptiness, this not knowing who she is, that builds the heart of her journey. And that is where most people connect with her, even without realizing it. From the beginning, Rei seems like a blank sheet. No past, no desires, no identity. She obeys orders, fights because she is told, lives because she is told she must live. But deep down, there is something very human there, the silent desire to understand her own value, who has never felt a little lost, trying to discover their role in life. It is this kind of discomfort that makes Rei more real than she seems. She is the first child pilot of Evangelion Unit 0. Just this description already carries enormous weight. After all, she does not pilot just a machine, but a symbol of hope and pain at the same time. The curious thing is that while everyone seeks to save the world, Rei seems to be just trying to save herself from herself. There is something sad, almost poetic, in the way she throws herself into battles, as if each fight were an attempt to feel alive for a moment. And that is where Evangelion's storytelling shines, because Rei is not just a character. She is a living metaphor. She represents emptiness, alienation, the search for meaning amid chaos. In a world where everyone pretends to have control, she shows what happens when someone is born without this formed self and must build it from scratch. It is loneliness transformed into existence. And this theme hits deeply for those who have ever felt invisible, replaceable, or easily forgotten. The most interesting thing is that the more we try to understand her, the more she slips away, as if Rei were made of mist. She changes form depending on the gaze of those observing her. For Gendo, she is a memory. For Shinji, a mirror. For the audience, a mystery. And perhaps that is precisely what makes her so fascinating. She is all of us at some stage of life trying to understand who we are through the eyes of others. Rei lives in a constant contradiction. She is human, but also not. She is alive, but feels as if she is not. And this duality accompanies her all the time, like an echo that never ceases. It is like that feeling of being surrounded by people, but still feeling an emptiness inside your chest. You know that type of silence that weighs more than noise. She rarely smiles, speaks little, and seems not to understand what affection is. But when something sparks in her eyes, even for a second, it is like watching the sunrise on a cloudy day. Because there, in that small change, there is humanity. A humanity she is still discovering herself. She is the type of character that makes us think about how much of our own identity comes from others, and perhaps that is what Evangelion wanted to show with her from the beginning. Rei is a mirror for the question we all ask in silence. Who am I if they take away everything they expect from me? It is a doubt that bothers, but also awakens. And it is precisely this spark that begins to ignite the fire of her internal conflicts, a fire we will feel burning in the next chapter of her story. Rei Ayanami's story does not begin like that of an ordinary girl. She is in fact the result of an experiment, a being created from the DNA of Yui Akari, Shinji's mother, and the enigmatic plans of Gendo Akari. In other words, Rei was born not from love, but from purpose, and that detail changes everything. Imagine growing up without a Y coming from the heart, but instead from a laboratory. It is like existing, but never really belonging. She is raised to serve a piece within a larger machine called nerve. From the beginning, she is conditioned to obey. But the curious thing is that Rei never rebels, at least not obviously. She accepts orders with the serenity of someone who does not know the right to say no, and there lies the first conflict. When life is programmed, where does one's own will begin? That is the silent question that follows Rei in every episode. The bond between Rei and Gendo is another complex point. He treats her coldly, but also with an almost unhealthy attachment, as if he sees in her a shadow of the woman he lost. And Rei, without understanding what love or affection is, only reciprocates with obedience. It is a relationship of emotional dependence disguised as loyalty, a distorted mirror of love, and that says a lot about how, many times, we confuse acceptance with submission. But as the story progresses, small cracks appear in this mask of indifference. Rei begins to ask questions. She begins to hesitate, and these hesitations are precious because they show something emerging within her consciousness. That moment when a person for the first time asks themselves, is this what I want or what they expect from me? And when that happens, her world begins to collapse, not from outside in, but from inside out. Each battle Rei faces inside the Eva reflects her own internal chaos. She fights monsters, but deep down, she is fighting her own existence. Against the fear of being replaced, of being disposable, because for her, dying and being recreated is already routine, literally, and this notion takes away all sense of life. After all, how can one value something that can be restarted at any moment? This is an anguish many people feel, even without clones or Evas, the fear of being forgotten. There is an almost poetic detail in Evangelion. Each time Rei dies and is replaced by a new version, something changes. Small fragments of memories, sensations, emotions, as if, despite the control, something human resists. This is beautiful and tragic at the same time. It shows that the essence of humanity is not in the body, but in the memories and connections that insist on remaining. And it is precisely in this process of self-discovery that Rei begins to transform. She, who previously obeyed blindly, begins to choose to make small but powerful decisions, and each one represents a step toward individuality. It is as if, with each version, she comes a little closer to being herself, even if no one knows exactly who she is. And perhaps that is the beauty of it all. The search is more important than the answer. But what triggers this change, what makes a person created to obey, finally question the purpose of their own existence? That is where the traumas begin to reveal themselves in visible wounds, accumulated in silence that begin to shape what she is and what she will become. Because before finding freedom, Rei will need to face the weight of not having been the owner of even her own birth. But facing this fear is just the beginning. Because when the heart begins to awaken and the emotional world opens, new questions arise. How far can I go? What do I really want? Is it worth feeling if it hurts so much? And these silent questions prepare the ground for the next trauma, the dilemma between attachment and fear of loss, which will test Rei on even deeper levels. Attachment and fear of loss, Rei Ayanami rarely forms bonds because she learned that attachment hurts. Every relationship carries the risk of loss, and for someone who was born replaceable, that is terrifying. She observes the world as if on the sidelines, ready to pull away before anyone abandons her. It is a silent protection, but also a constant pain, the fear of caring when she knows everything could disappear. When any form of connection arises, whether with Shinji or with others, Rei feels an internal tension. It is a delicate balance between wanting closeness and fearing the consequence of losing it. This conflict is human. No matter if you have never piloted an EVA, we all know the fear of investing emotionally and ending up hurt. Rei, however, experiences this in an amplified way because every bond carries the weight of life or death. The relationship with Gendo exemplifies this dilemma. He is at the same time a figure of attachment and rejection, someone who manipulates her, but also represents safety. For Rei, loving or caring is dangerous because love comes with expectation, risk, and pain. And in the silence of her routine, she learns to measure every gesture, every word, to not exceed the limit of her own emotional protection. And it is precisely this tension that makes us understand her complexity. When she hesitates, when she smiles almost imperceptibly, or when she approaches Shinji, we see the internal struggle between attachment and self-preservation. It is like watching someone dance on thin ice. Every step is calculated, yet still full of beauty and courage. Small moments of connection are great silent victories. The awareness that she could lose everything she loves makes her careful, almost distant. But this distance is not the absence of feeling. It is a survival strategy. She protects herself from pain before it arrives, like someone anticipating storms. And at the same time, it reminds us of how many times we behave the same way in real life, trying not to get hurt by avoiding closeness. And when loss finally occurs, the impact is devastating. Every broken bond is felt like a physical wound. The pain Rei avoids at all costs is inevitable, yet she continues. This silent resilience is a form of courage that is rarely recognized, but it shapes her personality and choices profoundly. The fear of loss also drives important decisions in her journey. Sometimes she withdraws, sometimes she gives in, and every choice is influenced by the balance between protecting herself and allowing herself to feel. It is a trauma that builds invisible layers in her personality and teaches us that attachment is not weakness, but a risk that requires courage. And even with all this fear, Rei continues moving forward, gradually discovering that attachment is, in a way, essential to feeling alive. But this discovery is not linear. Every step is cautious, every smile is a silent victory. And it is in this terrain of tension that the next trauma begins to unfold, the confrontation with her own mortality and the notion of sacrifice. Confrontation with mortality and sacrifice, Rei Ayanami lives with death around her, but never truly close to herself. Every battle in the EVA is a dance between existing and disappearing, and even when she dies, there is always a replacement, an almost inhuman continuity. It is as if death were a familiar visitor, something she learns to accept but never fully understand. This experience shapes her view of the world and herself in a deep and silent way. Sacrifice is something Rei knows intimately. She learns that her value is linked to utility, saving others, obeying orders, existing to fulfill a greater purpose. This transforms her into a symbol of altruism, but also of constant pain. And here lies the paradox, saving the world while trying to save her own essence, even without fully knowing what it is. Every confrontation with mortality reinforces the perception that life is fragile and transient. For Rei, feeling fear is a luxury she rarely allows herself. The mental preparation for sacrifice is as rigorous as her physical training. And it is curious to observe how this extreme discipline creates a layer of serenity which contrasts with the internal chaos she feels. It is a calm that is frightening, yet fascinating. The relationship with Shinji and other colleagues gains even more depth in this context. Every act of protection, every risk taken, is loaded with meaning. Rei is not only fighting monsters, she is fighting her own fear against the impulse to flee from the inevitable, and this silent struggle is what makes her one of the most complex and human characters in the series. Continuous sacrifice also generates a unique perception of the value of life. For Rei, death is not just an end, but a logical consequence of what it means to exist as a tool, and this forces her to constantly question the meaning of her actions. It is a type of reflection that connects with us immediately, who has never wondered if their efforts truly matter or if we are just pieces on a larger board. Even in the face of danger, Rei demonstrates a silent courage that few characters possess. It is not dramatic courage of grand gestures, but that subtle courage to keep living, to keep acting, even when every step could be the last. And it is in this courage that we find a powerful lesson. True strength is not always seen. It is often felt in small but constant acts. And it is precisely this constant confrontation with mortality that prepares her for moments of emotional and existential decision. Every battle, every near-death, strengthens the spark of identity that began to form. She learns that life is made of choices, even when death seems inevitable. And at this point, we realize how all previous traumas, identity, loneliness, attachment, fear, intertwine in an impressive way. But facing mortality also awakens deep questions. How far is it worth sacrificing oneself? What truly makes life meaningful? And as Rei walks between obeying and feeling, between existing and disappearing, we realize that her journey is far from over, because the last and perhaps greatest challenge is reconciling with herself. All of Rei's traumas, the absence of identity, loneliness, fear of feeling, attachment, and confrontation with mortality converge to form a unique personality. She is calm, silent, and distant, but that does not mean she is weak. On the contrary, every contained gesture, every minimal decision carries the weight of years of internal struggle. It is a silent strength that few people can understand. Rei's choices reflect a delicate balance between self-preservation and altruism. She acts to protect others even when it means sacrificing herself. But these actions do not arise from heroic impulse, but from a consciousness shaped by experiences of pain and emptiness. It is as if each act were calculated to maintain a thread of humanity even amid the chaos around her. Her ability to observe and react in a contained manner is a direct result of loneliness and fear of losing emotional control. Rei learns that feeling too much can be dangerous, so every expression, every word, is measured. And this containment is not indifference, it is a strategy of emotional survival. Those who observe perceive the weight behind the quietness and understand that silence also speaks. The fear of loss and limited attachment makes her careful in human relationships. Every bond is precious, and every gesture of connection is both desired and feared. Rei teaches us that affection is valuable and that the fear of losing it is not weakness, but proof that feeling means being alive. It is in this contrast that her humanity shines subtly, yet intensely. Even in the face of almost mechanical orders and obligations, she begins to make small decisions that reflect internal growth. Hesitations, gestures of closeness, silent curiosity, they are signs that the construction of identity is possible, even for someone created to obey. Rei shows us that even in extreme conditions, personal development is possible. Her journey also teaches us about emotional resilience. Every trauma faced, every risk taken, reinforces the ability to continue, even when everything seems lost. Rei's life is a reminder that enduring pain not only hardens, but also forms courage. A courage that manifests silently, almost imperceptibly, but deeply transformative. Furthermore, Rei demonstrates that humanity is not measured by the display of feelings, but by the depth of experiences lived. She is proof that introspection, contemplation, and silence can also be powerful. Every act, even small, carries meaning, and every choice she makes invites us to reflect on our own decisions, fears, and ways of connecting. And in the end, we realize that all these factors shape not only who Rei Ayanami is, but also what she represents. The constant struggle between existing and understanding oneself, between feeling and protecting oneself, between obeying and freeing oneself, it is a mirror that reflects our own doubts, fears, and potentials. And as we watch her walk this delicate balance, we begin to understand that her true journey, and perhaps ours, is just beginning. So, what did you think about diving into the mind of Rei Ayanami? Can you feel the intensity of every silence, every choice, every fear of hers? Her story teaches us that identity, attachment, and courage are not always easy, and that facing one's own traumas is an ongoing process, full of small, silent victories. And here is the question: which character do you want us to analyze in the next video? Who would you like to explore deeply, understanding every trauma, every choice, and every emotion? I want to know your opinion, because this channel is made for those who want to go beyond the surface, who want to connect with stories and learn from them. If you were touched by Rei's story, identified with her, or learned something new, do not forget to subscribe to the channel and activate notifications. That way, you will not miss the next psychological deep dives into characters who challenge understanding and who in some way reflect our own existence. And remember, every silence, every contained gesture, every fear faced is an opportunity to understand more about yourself. Because, in the end, analyzing Rei is also looking inward and recognizing that we all carry fragments of her dilemmas.